You know, when you first look at computer code, it can feel like a totally alien language, right? But here's the secret. Just like any language, it has its own grammar. And today, we're going to look at the most basic part of that grammar. These simple little phrases that, believe it or not, every single program is built from. So let's dive right in.
Okay, so to get us started, I want you to just look at two little pieces of code. As you see them pop up, just ask yourself, what's the one thing they really have in common?
All right, so on one side, we've got 5 plus 3. Super simple math. On the other side, we have hello plus this thing called name, which is basically joining two pieces of text together. At first glance, they look totally different, don't they? One's all about numbers, the other's about words. So what could possibly be the connection here?
Well, the answer is actually in the basic grammar of code. And look, this really matters because once you start seeing these fundamental patterns, even really complex software starts to make sense. It's kind of the key to going from feeling totally overwhelmed by code to actually understanding it.
So here it is, the big connection. A computer looks at both of these and sees them as phrases that it needs to simplify. It takes 5 plus 3 and boils it down to a single value, 8. And then it takes hello plus, let's say the variable name is holding the word friend, and it boils that down to a single value too, hello friend. See? In both cases, they get reduced to one single final value. That's the key.
And you know, this whole idea of a code phrase that produces a value, it's so incredibly fundamental that it has its own special name in programming. We call it an expression. And honestly, once you get comfortable with this one idea, it changes everything.
There's a great definition out there that really captures this perfectly. It says an expression is a phrase of code that can be evaluated to produce a value. And those are the key words right there, evaluate and produce a value. See, an expression isn't a command to do something. It's just a little piece of code that becomes something else. It becomes one singular value.
So if there's one thing to really get, it's this. I want you to think of an expression kind of like a recipe. You take some ingredients, those are your values and variables, and you combine them with some actions. We call those operators. And what you get at the end? One finished dish, or in our case, one single value.
And the cool thing is, the ingredients for these expressions are super simple. First, you've got what we call literals. That's just a fancy word for raw, fixed values. You know, like the number 5 or the text hello. They are what they are. Then you have variables, and these are just placeholders for values, like a variable called user age that's maybe holding on to the number 21.
So how do we combine those building blocks? We use things called operators. And if you think about our little code phrases, if literals and variables are the nouns, then operators are definitely the verbs. They do the action. The plus sign, for example, either adds numbers or it glues text together. The star sign multiplies. And then you have operators like the double equal sign, which ask a question, like, hey, are these two things equal? And the value it produces is super simple, just true or false.
Okay, let's look at a real-world example to see this in action. In this little snippet of JavaScript, expressions are literally everywhere. See that part, navigator.app version? That's an expression. The computer reads that and immediately replaces it with whatever the actual version value is. And then there's this one, agent plus space plus major. That's another, slightly more complex expression. The program has to figure that whole thing out and boil it down to a single piece of text before it can do anything else.
All right, now this is where, for a lot of people, it really starts to click. We've been talking about expressions as the phrases of code. So that begs the question, what are the full sentences? This is the next step, where we see how these little phrases fit into the bigger picture of making a program actually do something useful. So think about it like this. An expression, or phrase, it just produces a value. That's all it does. 5 plus 3 simply is 8. It just kind of sits there, holding that value, but it's not actually doing anything with it. But a statement, that's our full sentence, a statement performs a complete action. So something like let total equal 5 plus 3, that's a whole command. It uses our expression, 5 plus 3, waits for it to become the value 8, and then it performs the action of storing that value in a new variable called total. So yeah, the expression is the what, and the statement is the do.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Honestly, it's not about memorizing a bunch of definitions. Not at all. It's really about learning a new way to see code. And here's a really simple, practical way you can start doing that. First, when you look at code, just try to notice the phrases. Look for those little combinations that you know are going to boil down to one single thing. Step 2, try to identify the simple blocks they're made of.
Ask yourself, is that a raw value? Is it a variable? What's the operator connecting them? And then finally, step 3, just watch how the full sentences, the statements, take those phrases and put them to work to get something done.
Because at the end of the day, every single complex app, every website, all the software out there, it's all just made of these simple little phrases, stacked one on top of the other. You don't ever need to understand everything all at once. Really, you just need to focus on understanding the next one.